the band?
Oh, so we had a get-together over at Bela's, and everybody came and started picking. And Allison, she was just such a huge, fan of Newgrass that she was trying to keep her cool. And her father, as always, had his video camera and had to be told to cool it. And Allison was sort of embarrassed by the whole situation, but she held up pretty well, and that just made it so much easier when we recorded. She had gone through and she had met all these people, and so when we had a recording session, we had I think we had Tony Trishka and Jerry Douglas and all these people playing on the record. It didn't phase her in quite the same way.
How did you first hear of her?
It was a demo tape. One of those things you listen to, and I don't know how I got to cut 4. It was an OK group, and she didn't sing lead until the 4th song. It was a Newgrass Revival gospel tune, and I just, loved it.
When you say a demo tape, I mean, did it have an introduction? Did you know it was coming? Did someone say
No, it was
listen
just
to it?
totally out of the blue.
It was cold?
Total cold.
And you listened to it, with the day's mail or the month's mail when you got to it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And just, really liked it, and I called up the mother of the mandolin player, who was the manager of the group.
I'm having a hard time with this. Just regret this because I didn't know this story.
Oh,
this is you had no introduction to this young girl.
No,
you
I never
had
heard
a
of
cold demo tape. It was, I'm going to listen to this next thing.
And it wasn't under her name.
Okay.
It was, under the band name.
Okay.
And
was it Union Station at that time?
No,
Okay.
no. She had 2 different bands.
Okay.
One was Union Station, and Union Station, I think, was in Indiana, and the other one was in Illinois, or something like that.
Right.
And whoever called up first would get her.
Okay, so it's this stone cold demo tape. You have no idea what you're going to listen to.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
And so there's this group, and it's fairly competent, some interesting songs, and then it got to her voice, and I was really interested. And I called up, and I spoke to the mother, and she said, well, if you want a reference, why don't you call up Dave Samuelson?
I know who he is. I've never
Yeah.
met him. Yeah.
He did Puritan Records and the Battleground Fiddlers Convention in Indiana.
Well, you know what I know him from? He did that. I don't know if you know this, although you might. I mean, it's not, he did that Big Bear Family box on political music
Oh,
in
yeah,
the 40s
yeah,
and 50s.
right,
That's how
yeah.
that's my contact with him.
Right, which is much later.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it's the 90s.
He had done the Kenny Baker guitar records,
Okay.
and so I contacted him, and I think I still have a letter around on that. And he said, well, she can be anything she wants. She can be Joe Venuti or Stefan Grappelli, but I'd surround her with real good musicians, and I'd concentrate on the instrumental part. Unfortunately, I didn't follow that, but he
Well,
got
did the
me.
fiddling strike you on the demo tape that you listened to?
It was no, it didn't.
Did you care about that?
No, I didn't care. It was the vocal that grabbed me,
Okay.
and so he got me a phone number, and I called her up, and we talked, and it was always Allison doing the talking, even at that age. Her parents let her do the talking, and I said I'd like to hear some more, and a week later I got a tape in the mail. And her parents had gone into the studio and gotten musicians. One of the, in fact, it was mostly the other band, I believe, and did a demo that featured her rather than the other singers who were on the tape. And I spoke to Mary and Bill, said I really like this tape. I know it's sort of unusual. She's 13, and but I'd like to do a record, and they gave me the go-ahead. And about that time, went to a show at Night Stage. I think it might have been Irma Thomas, and the guy who does the booking for the Newport Folk Festival was there. He said, "Well, it's interesting. I think I saw her, and they played at the Kentucky Fried Chicken Festival, and I was thinking of having her for Newport." And I said, "Well, we're gonna sign her." So we decided, yeah. So I called.
Where 91, 90, what's the 89? What's the? It's 99 now. How long has she been around?
More than 10 years. So it would have been about that.
Okay, late 80s.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I called her up and I said, "Allison, I have two things to tell you. One, I think you're going to get invited to the Newport Folk Festival." She said, "What's that?" And so I told her, and it was no big deal.
Where's she living? Where was she living?
Champaign.
Okay.
And the other is we'd like to do a record. And we disagree on this, but I distinctly remember her saying, "Mommy, Mommy!" And it was the first time, it was like the egg cracking.
Oh, the first time she was a kid?
Yeah, the first time she was a kid. Because up until then, I mean, I thought I was dealing with a 19-year-old. I mean, I knew otherwise, but she was just, so professional and handled herself so well. And that was it. And then we hadn't met her at that time.
Really?
Yeah, it was all phone. We met her in Nashville before we were going to record, and we went over to the Opry, and she didn't have her fiddle, and she borrowed one, and I think it was like a 6-string fiddle or something like that, which he played, and it was one of those backstage things, and pretty soon everybody stopped playing because she was, trying to play everything that she knew, as hot as she could be. It wasn't like a jam session. I mean, she was like, she just wasn't familiar with protocol or
the etiquette.
Yeah.
Protocol is a better word, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Etiquette too.
Yeah.
Jamming etiquette.
Yeah.
So she learned.
Well,
she's very very bright and very quick, but she just didn't have any experience.
What kind of seasoning did she have? What had she been doing? He heard her at some Kentucky Fried Chicken Festival. What?
She'd been playing with different groups. She started off playing with her, her mother backed her on guitar at fiddlers' conventions and contests.
But no name. She hadn't made any real impact on people.
Oh no, she was with these two different bluegrass groups, and she was not the featured singer in either.
How long had she been doing that before she centered in? Couldn't have been very long.
Well, she was like 13.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, till the group did.
Yeah. Her parents played. Her mother at least played.
Mother plays a little bit, yeah.
Okay, but nothing.
No, she outstripped her, surpassed her mother in no time.
What did Bill and Marion think of the tape? I mean, obviously they said yes, but what did they think of the voice in the tape? Did it strike them the way they struck you, or?
No, I think they were just humoring me.
Uh-huh.
Ready?
Okay. Okay, so you assembled a band. She was working with 2 bands, but for the recording, you assembled a band that you thought was more professional.
Well, it was in conjunction with her. Part of the first record was used virtually everybody in her band, I think. And then we had some ringers, regular studio people.
Did you use the song, the Newgrass song that she
No.
bowled you over with?
No, she
Okay.
wasn't interested in that.
Is that right?
Yeah. Well, she had a lot of original material, not that she had written, but that her bass player and the person who was running one of the bands, Jonathan L. And so they focused on that, which was very interesting for somebody who was 14 or 15 by that point.
Now, her bass player, was he someone known to you?
No,
Yeah,
I didn't know any.
okay.
I didn't know anybody in either of the two bands.
Right. So what did you think of the songs? I mean, were you know, you must have had some interest in what she was recording in terms of tunes.
Well, they were very interesting in that they were a little bit off bluegrass, and they had unusual chords and lyrics. So, I think we were very fortunate that John was as good a writer as he was, and also that he had this backlog of material.
Yeah.
And even when we didn't finish the record and she came back down, I think it was 2 weeks later, he had written or finished 2 more songs, because we were a little bit short.
Did you have any expectations in particular of it being anything other than the normal round of career?
No.
Okay.
No. I've gone, I mean, my feeling always is if I like it, that somebody else will. But sometimes that somebody is very small, and sometimes it's larger.
Now, that wasn't a particularly huge seller, was it? The first record.
No, it probably, well, by today's standards, it was pretty good. I mean, it probably sold something like 7,500 copies or something, before the second one came out.
Right.
And considering that she was a total unknown, she was a woman, which at that point was still, one of the early. I mean, Laurie Lewis was out there a little bit. Rhonda Vincent had been out there a bit. Certainly Hazel Dickens, Gloria Bell. But I mean, you really have to think about who was out there performing and who was fronting, and there are very few.
Right.
I remember, speaking to festival people and saying, I know you don't book many women in your festivals, but she's really good, just getting not a whole lot of support.
What was the critical reaction to the album, and how much attention was paid to it?
A fair amount. It wasn't a tremendous amount.
Yeah. You had said yesterday, I think one of the things you were especially proud of was Breaking Women in Bluegrass. How much did you do? The first Hazel and Alice album that you did was 75 or so?
73.
73?
Right.
Okay. And then what came next along those lines?
Probably the second Hazel and Alice record.
Yeah.
And then 3 Hazel solo albums. And I don't remember quite the order beyond that, but we'd done Ola Bell, who was more old-timey, and did a couple albums of one full album with Wilma Lee and Stoney, and one Wilma Lee, and then, not in any particular order, Lynn Morris, Laurie Lewis, Clara Lynch, we recently signed Rhonda Vincent, Suzanne Thomas, Stephen Sisters. And it's pretty, I'm sure I'm leaving somebody out, but it's pretty incredible.
Is there real resistance today to this? I mean,
No.
No. I wouldn't think. How did you come with Laurie Lewis? Is from my stomping grounds. How did you? And I used to see her occasionally at Paul's Saloon. How did you get turned on to her? I'm just curious about that.
Well, it was originally sent a tape by Tim O'Brien, but when first got that, I was into pretty hardcore stuff, and I felt that Laurie was too contemporary for what we were doing. And then it got to the point that she did, I think, 3 records on Flying Fish, and then she was free. And by that time, I had opened my ears a little bit more, or was not quite so limited in what I would consider to be good bluegrass.
And yet you'd already done new acoustic music type stuff.
Well, it was vocals. It was we went from the very traditional to the to the very progressive,
Uh-huh.
and not much in between.
Yeah, but Lori wasn't either, I guess. Is that what you're saying?
Right,
So
yeah, yeah.
She wasn't super progressive, but not, she wasn't super traditional. Okay.
Right.
So you kind of zipped over her and had
Yeah,
to back up
right.
a little bit.
Mhm.
Okay. Did you ever got to see her? Did you see her in San Francisco? Or in Berkeley?
No.
Okay.
But she was touring nationally.
Yeah. Now, was Heartbeat the first other label that Rounder formed? I'll talk a little bit about what prompted you to form your other labels. I don't know if it was Heartbeat.
Genre-wise, it was, I think. We had ambient sound for a little while, which was doo-wop, and Varick, which I think we mentioned was named
Yeah.
after Charlie Varick,
Right.
the last of the Independents. I don't remember the chronology on that.
Okay.
I think it might have been a little bit later on.
Given your eclecticism to begin with, why did you feel you wanted other labels at all? What was the...
Well, part of the, at least with Varick, part of the problem was that a lot of people said that we were flooding the market and putting out too many records. And so we figured, well, there are a lot of these people are going to come out on records anyway, so if we just take them and put them on other labels, then they'll say, well, there's 5 records from Rounder and 2 from Varick and 3 from Philo. And, it won't seem like we're putting out so many.
They all say Rounder somewhere at the bottom there.
Right, well, they'd have to figure that out.
Was that really it? I mean, that was
Well, I think with Varick it was,
Okay.
partially. With Heartbeat, it was really a different genre, and we wanted to keep it separate.
Okay.
Bullseye Blues later on was largely because we felt that even though we had been putting out blues records and other Afro-American records for a long time, that we weren't really getting recognized as a blues label,
Mhm.
and that some other labels who were much more limited in what they did had higher profiles, even though we felt that the records we were putting out were every bit as good. People would think blues, Alligator, blues, Blacktop, not blues, Rounder.
Right.
But, so when we started a label and called it Bullseye Blues, they couldn't sort of avoid the idea that it would have blues content.
Was that a very personal, I mean, was Marion and Ron Levy the reason that sort of came to the forefront at that point, or her involvement with him and marriage to him? And I don't know what the chronology was in terms of, he was with the label from the outset, so I take it he was there before you formed it.
Yeah, he was there. I mean, Scott had been producing blues records for years.
Right.
And we put out blues records way before that. I mean, we put out David Evans stuff.
Yeah.
And George Mitchell's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I talked to Bill about some of that. I have some of those old records, but I guess what I'm asking is was that the impetus for partially the impetus for a new label, a personal involvement, a person to really get involved with it?
It wasn't in mind, but as far as I was concerned, the idea was to be able to sell our blues records better, and that to get a higher level of identification.
Did you bring in people who just, or at least a person, I guess, who just worked on blues promotion?
I don't think we did initially. We brought John Kane in later on, but initially we weren't doing that with any form of music. That developed later on.
Well, Bullseye Blues was later on, I guess, in the scheme of things, right? That was formed around 90 or so.
Yeah, but I think John Kane might have been with us 4 or 5 years, so we didn't really have anybody just doing blues promotion.
We were talking yesterday about tightening up of the markets. What acts have you just felt felt you needed to drop for sales reasons, that you just couldn't sustain any longer? I mean, I guess the ones that hurt you the most, maybe.
Well, some of them left and some of them were dropped, but I think, and some of them are just inactive. I think the one that I was probably closest to that hasn't worked out financially is the Whitstone brothers, who I've always felt are just incredible and the best at what they do, and among the best that ever has been, as far as a brother duet and that kind of styling.
And they put you up and
Incredible.
stuff. And you said they put you up in their homes, and
Oh, yeah.
Have you had to drop them, or just?
They're inactive right now, so it
Yeah.
hasn't really come up.
Yeah.
But it would be a very tough sell at this point. Another one who left after the last record is David Olney, who has always been one of my favorite writers, and I just have felt very badly that the greater world hasn't recognized him. Sort of, I feel badly about Paul Siebel, but by the time I put the record out, he hadn't been active for 25 years.
You didn't drop him.
Yeah, right.
you
Yeah.
never signed him.
Yeah.
You just, yeah.
Right. For David, we put out some wonderful records with incredible songs, and we were talking before about the user-friendly, like folk audience. He's just, he's a lot more demanding as a writer and a performer, and just never really caught on to the degree that I felt he should.
Yeah. Did you let him go, or did not renew his contract, or?
He actually left. The last record, it was almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that he had wanted to have a lot more promotional budget, and the overall team didn't feel, based on his previous sales, that it was warranted. And it's a tough thing, just because I believed in him. It didn't seem that the rest of the world did.
What happened to the Holmes brothers? Three of my favorites.
Yeah.
My favorite actor. I talked about it with Scott a little bit.
Yeah.
What was their fate?
We should speak to Scott about it. I thought we should continue working with him, and still do. And I think part of the discussion was that their sales had been dropping, and they didn't really have anything new. And I brought up in the last meeting that I don't know if the outside world cares if they have anything new. I think that, I don't think that Doyle Lawson and Quicksilver have added anything new to what they've been doing for the last 10 years. I don't think the Country Gentlemen have added anything new in 20 years. But their fans still like them and still buy X number of records. So that's it's a tough one, and I still would like to see that brought up and reversed.
Throw out another one that now I'm spinning off. I haven't even talked about this with Scott. I just love the records. Terry Evans and
Bobby King.
Yeah. Those are great records that I love.
Yeah.
Where'd they go? And I think one of them ended up recording as a solo, didn't he? Like some other label.
Yeah. they basically didn't tour. And you just can't afford to make records on that level without touring. That was real disappointing. So something that we went after and felt pretty good about getting and loved, the records, especially the first one.
Yeah.
And then to not have it sell very much. But you really need to have people out there, and they weren't getting out there, or at least not on their own, not doing the material. Sometimes when they did get out, they would do Story Monday sets.
For everybody went.
Yeah, I mean, people who'd come to really hear them. They could sing. They could sing the phone book.
Yeah.
But just not using for the hardcore blues fan. They can't do that. They have to have different material.
You've always got this. You've said it to me several times, I think, and I've seen it in articles where one of the things is that you've got to feel you can work with the person, like them enough to work with them. Has it reached a point where do you know all your acts?
I know the ones that I'm working with. And I think Marion probably knows the ones that that she's working with, and the same with Scott.
Yeah. Okay, so
We don't, I don't think we feel we need to. I think the sponsor knows who they're dealing with.
right. Okay. What's your prediction as to how Rounder is going to be able to sell? I'm really interested in how, in this tightening market, you're going to be able to sell, some of the more heavily traditional albums that you make, maybe the field type recordings where there's nobody, not just reissues. The one the banjo record we were talking about today. I don't remember if I was talking about it with you or just with Bill, but how are you going to be able to work with those things in the future, given the tightening market that you've described? Chris Stropwitz has said to me that he thinks the market for traditional music, true traditional music, is just really drying up. And I don't know. He's used that word. He's been that extreme. We're really tightening up. How are you in the next 10 years? I'm talking purely business, going to be able to, take a banjo record with no live, no performers, no professionals to go out and tour and support it. Given your own, expression of interest in an act that being willing to work their record, how are you going to keep it in the catalog and take on new stuff?
We're really not sure.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I think of the three of us, I'm probably the one who would like to see least change. Marion would like to see the most change, and Bill is somewhere in the middle, I think. I'd still love to do these kinds of things. This is, I'm just not that interested in putting out recordings that are similar to what anybody else could be doing. I just don't want to be another middle of the road label. It just has no interest. And I saw what happened with Flying Fish and with Folkways toward the end. And they both were extremely diluted. And I think they lost a lot of credibility. You got the feeling with Flying Fish that just if you came to them with X amount of money, that they would put out the record. And with Folkways, it was almost, it didn't seem like there was very much, either there wasn't much discrimination toward the end, or else a situation that had existed for them previously where they had all kinds of, they had virtually no competition except in the jazz area. But in many of the other areas, they didn't really have much competition. And then all of a sudden, things changed, and there were all these other labels. And so I don't think Folkways got the same quality tapes or performers. If somebody wanted to get promoted, they'd do much better going to Rebel and much later to Rounder or Sugar Hill or, virtually anybody than Folkways.
They never got promoted.
Yeah.
Not in 1952,
No.
not later.
Yep. No, they didn't. And, I just I wouldn't really want to see that happen to Rounder. It wouldn't come to the same level, but I just wouldn't like it to lose the vision that the label had.
Okay, but that's not. I don't know that gets to my question, which I guess is really, can Rounder continue to put out one type of record, which it's done a lot of in the past, and that is a record that cannot be supported by touring, retail displays, or radio play.
Yeah.
You put out lots of records like that.
I think I did answer that, and that is, I don't know.
Okay.
We'll be, we're certainly looking at the internet, and we hope that, we hope that things will do well, and we'll be able to find different types of situations where we'll be able to sell enough copies to be able to keep a lot of these things coming out. But right now it doesn't look great. Retail doesn't seem to be very interested in these. There are some mail order companies that are, and our web sales are increasing, but I don't know if they're increasing enough to make it to that level.
Do you get records like that on an Amazon? Do they pick carefully what they're going to market? Since it takes almost nothing for them to. I don't know if Amazon. Well, Amazon does sell your records, but do they pick and choose among titles, or can they offer a whole catalog?
They still pick and choose. They have their own thing that they do. But they're not, they're not the only game in town. And who knows where they're going to be in 10 years? Seems like the stock keeps going down, down.
I know. You're doing the same thing yourself, but well, you don't do the recommendations, but you sell the stuff. Your stuff is there. You can buy straight from you. All right, well, you don't know. That's a fair answer. You're right.
Yeah.
Right now, as a hearing, it's a fair answer. There's danger there, I gather.
Oh, absolutely.
Chris Strachwitz feels there's danger, and you feel there's danger.
Yeah.
What kind of change do you perceive Marion is wanting? I know I can ask her what she wants, but you've broached it, so you obviously have in mind a certain level of change that you think she advocates, or I'm sure she's advocated it to you directly.
I prefer you go to her.
Okay. Well, I'm just curious as to what do you perceive as big change? What type of big change do you perceive as being bandied about in the company? Not necessarily any individual, just what are the options that are under discussion?
Well, you can sign artists at different levels. You can put together different kinds of alliances or joint ventures. You can cut back on the lower selling records. You can do different types of promotion. You can put out fewer records and try spending a lot more on certain ones. There are just lots of different It could cut back the number of employees. There are lots of things one could do. Competing with ourselves.
So is that solved by more people or fewer projects? I guess it's either one could do it, right? Is there a difference of
Either
opinion
one or
about
both,
that?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's been really hard for us to cut back because we go through and we say, well, we only did this many bluegrass records, we only did this many blues records, we only did these many children's records. Doesn't seem like any of them are all that many until you add them up.
Right. So I guess the question becomes, and I guess you haven't figured this out yet, do you cut each genre by 15%, or do you just wipe out two genres, just lop it off? And I guess you could do both. And there's no decisions there.
No, I think a lot of that kind of decision is what is available to you.
Yeah.
Rather than making a decision. Who are the acts that you might be interested in?
But in some ways, that's not making the decision, because that says, well, gee, we'll keep all the genres, and to the extent stuff is available that's good, we'll sign it, bring it in, and then you're back where you.
Well, if there's that much good stuff.
Yeah. Now, Kids is relatively new, isn't it? That's quite new. As Rounder Kid, as a division, isn't it?
Well, we've always had series.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know the numerical.
Bill went through the whole
Yeah.
lineup with me. I don't know that he ever reached Kids or.
Yeah,
But
the
he
8,000s
Okay.
were
He
were
might-
kids. We have that Mike and Peggy Seeger record,
Yeah,
which we've
I
had
know.
for, that was 8,001, 2, 3.
Right.
And that's been around for ages. I mean, 8004, to put it in perspective, is Bessie Jones.
Mhm.
And she's probably been dead for 15 years.
Yeah. But Rounder Kids is relatively new, and as you've got something that you refer to as that, right?
Right. Well, the Rounder Kids is more the distribution company.
I see. Okay. Okay, so how does that work? I knew it's not a label, right? I didn't think it was a label.
I think the records may say Rounder Kids on it
Okay.
now, but Rounder Kids distributes, virtually every children's record that exists.
Okay.
I mean, it's higher profile right now because we have the label because it has the Rappy
Right.
records.
Okay.
But before that, we earned lots of Parents' Choice Awards and things like that. So it's been active for quite a while, and some of the things I would think would be at least 15, maybe 20 years old, like at Seeger County.
Why did the Smithsonian Folkways arrangement end? What was seems like such a natural fit?
You want to turn that off?
No, sure.
They didn't think he's so cute together. I'm like, that doesn't talk like that.
June 10th, 1999, Bill Nowlin and Marion Leighton Levy.
Okay.
Good morning,
Resolving
Michael.
that, folks. Actually, what I'd like to pursue, because we talked a little bit about this, and then I talked about it with Ken last night, when you were doing the early history of bluegrass, what are your reminiscences of that journey down south, if any?
Well, it would be interesting if Ken were here, because I'd be very interested to hear his also, because I'm sure that each of ours is quite and very different. Yes, it's turning. My recollections, I shared with you some of my reactions to the Old Time Fiddlers conventions. Well, it was sort of similar in the sense that it was a phenomenon that I previously had no contact with until I went with Ken and Bill for the first time to Union Grove. The Bluegrass convention phenomenon was somewhat different though, because I remember not really liking most of the groups that I thought of it as the sort of smoother DC sounding groups, and groups like Cliff Waldron and so on, not to get into names, which no longer, I mean, they're groups that no longer exist, but they were the stars of the whole bluegrass festival circuit.
Before the seldom scene, including the seldom scene.
Yes,
Yeah.
but the Country Gentleman, I think, sort of personified it at a certain point. And in fact, after a few years, I mellowed a little bit about the Country Gentleman and the Seldom Seen and liked them a little bit more. And in fact, it's only a sort of shading in terms of how different J.D. Crowe was from them. They all were a part of the same cultural milieu.
Yeah.
But the ones that I think all three of us, but I can certainly speak for myself and say this, liked best were the sort of some of the first generation who were the kind of the most, I would say, cuckoo, like Bill Monroe himself, of course, and definitely one of my favorites who was, I mean, she's like your worst nightmare if you're a blues musician. He was that way for the bluegrass circles, is Jimmy Martin, who I absolutely love his recorded work, but he was one strange dude with his leisure suit up there, and his banjo player, who'd usually be about half or a third his age, would be taking a break, and Jimmy would think it was tremendously funny to run his hand up between the guy's legs just to make him flinch and blow his break, and then of course the audience thought that this was all totally hysterical, and they would clap and laugh uproariously, while the banjo player would sort of try to do the best he could.
Or he'd take his gum out and put it in the bass player's hair. Yeah.
You know, I recently read an article about Jimmy Martin to the effect that he hasn't gotten his due because he's been so difficult that people find.
It is
Yeah.
absolutely true. But that was one of the things I would say that particularly when we first started Rounder, I had a lot more tolerance for than I do today, are people who are their own worst enemies. And Jimmy Martin was definitely case in point. But for a few years, he was one of the top dogs, and his recordings still, many of us feel are, just incredible. What I used to call metaphysical bluegrass. But I have lots of memories of being at bluegrass festivals, when it's starting to get dark and it's all hot and humid and sweaty and the bands are on the stage, and reading 60s books about radical politics and history and stuff like Herbert Marcuse, which nobody else at the entire bluegrass festival, of course, had.
Now, that's interesting. I've talked about that with some other people in the folk revival scene. Did you ever take it upon yourself to share it with the people with whom you were dealing, the artists?
Not a whole lot. Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Read selections from the mic,
Yeah. No, but people that you talk to, even people that we were fairly close to, I knew that it was totally foreign, and that was okay with me. But it was something that I was nonetheless not going to be deprived of because it meant a lot to me.
I've talked to, I don't know, half dozen to 10 years earlier, Irwin Silver once told me that he used to want to get the revival acts brought up to Newport. He used to want to incorporate, his basis was radical politics, probably more than folk song.
Yes.
And he wanted to involve the artists in the politicization of Newport that he advocated. John Cohen, on the other hand, he said would scream at him about offending the dignity of the artists and imposing his views on them. Did that, you stayed away from that, I gather? You didn't really
Stayed away from it, but I will say that I think that that's one of the things that had changed in the years between John Cohen's youth and Irwin Silver to the time that we started Rounder. I think that there were fewer illusions that, the folk, as if some sort of pure folk existed, were just dying to have their consciousness raised and to become, see themselves as members of an oppressed minority who are going to take control of their culture. It just was ridiculous to think that. Most of them were very conservative politically. And it's not just a matter of respecting their dignity, but it's also a matter of, if you're going to talk to someone, you've also got to sort of respect where they're coming from, as opposed to just sort of sitting there and preaching to them. Because if you do, you're going to lose them, and they're not going to. I remember Bill one time in West Virginia almost getting himself into being converted because he was trying to be very polite and respectful.
So I was going to say, it worked the other way around.
Yes.
They tried to preach to us, and would try to convert us to their views of the Bible and so forth. So not everybody, of course, but it happened more that way. We'd run more into people that looked at us and probably perceived us as semi-lost souls that that they needed to bring back into the fold. But
Or bring into the fold for the first
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
And in one case, Bill was being very polite, and we were all three standing at a door saying goodbye to this woman. Was it in Pipestem, West Virginia?
No, it was our sister, Blind Alfred Reed.
Yeah.
Cecily Reed.
Yeah. And as we were leaving, we'd been talking, and I was sort of the one of the three of us most conversant with the Bible. And so, in her case, she wanted to talk a lot about the Bible, and I actually could quote scripture back to her and stuff, which I didn't feel I was being disingenuous in doing, because it is something that I just happen to know because I'd studied Bible for years myself and was converted and baptized when I was a girl. But as we're leaving, she says, there's been a link forged and all of that, but she's actually, wasn't she holding your hand, Bill, or close to it? And she says, and now if you will just accept the Lord Jesus Christ into your heart as your Savior. And Bill, of course, and I'm holding my breath because I'm thinking, oh my God, he doesn't understand that this is shorthand, that he's going to have a conversion experience and is agreeing to be baptized, because that's the exact wording that he used. And he's nodding his head and being very polite, and she's like, oh, I'm so glad you are. And she was practically going to start drawing him back into the house. Let's sit right down and get this lost soul.
The way I remember, she asked me a question. She asked me, are you prepared to accept Jesus into your life?
He's nodding yes.
And I said yes, because I took it as a philosophical point. Sure, I'm prepared. Whether he makes that impression on me adequately, I doubt, but I'm open to that possibility. And I think,
It was very funny, and I'm quaking in my boots and trying to sort of, oh yes, we all are very interested in, or something like that, and we beat a hasty retreat, but it was really
But
kind of funny.
Marion just kind of knocked her back at one point too, because she'd said something and Marion corrected her and said essentially that's not what that's incorrect. The Bible says this, and quoted it, and then I think she may have gone up and looked it up and found out that Marion was right, and then maybe decided
I was
let
very
that go.
I was very sharp on my Bible memorization, but it was very fun. But I think though that there were other times that I'm trying to think if I can recall any specifically, but where we would talk with people in sort of general terms about some of the political feelings that we had, but not in sort of how would you say using kind of the jargon or the rhetoric of the left. And I think I felt anyhow that there were many, many times that there was in fact a real commonality with the people once you actually sat down on their turf, on their terms, and making it clear that you accept them for who they are, and talked, that once you got beyond that point, that in fact, there were a lot of things that they were much wiser and smarter and less sort of totally conservative than you would have ever been able to find out if you tried to just engage them in a more sort of didactic way. And I think that's one of the differences between the old left and people who were new left, but not sort of the leaders who, sort of, that was their coin of the realm and what they had to sort of talk in those terms when they were writing and so on, or when they were addressing large gatherings. But if you're someone who understood all of that, but were just sitting and talking to someone who had no contact with that, and didn't sort of throw all of that in their face. In fact, there were a lot of really nice friendships and acquaintances that we made, and it was obvious that the main thing that they really liked was having someone who actually was interested in what they had done, because even among their own neighbors and friends and so on, in many cases, nobody was that interested to hear about what Steve Ledford had done back in the 1930s or something.
It was, whether your father or your mother played a musical instrument, people being asked about their own family and how they developed and how they did stuff. Some people just don't want to talk about it, but most people take some, there's some element of being flattered to be asked, and that somebody has a genuine interest in you're not just making conversation because you ran into them at a bar, but you came over to visit them, to ask these questions, and write it down.
Did you stay with any people in their homes on that big Spotswood journey?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think actually what we tended to do more often than
What
not.
do you mean, Dick Spotswood journey?
Isn't this the series, the early years of
But
Bluegrass?
yeah, that's why I wanted to get back to that, because Marion didn't respond to that. She was just talking about going to Bluegrass Festival.
Right, but then you moved on
Right.
into
What-
tracking people down, and
What
I think you took the early years of Bluegrass.
Oh, you're talking
he was
about
asking
when
about
we were
the
actually
early days
working
of
on the
Bluegrass
grant.
series.
Yeah, I think you were. I know that you heard it in a colloquial sense as opposed to a specific sense, but it was
Right.
fine. So I wanted to just keep going. I just,
Yeah.
but I guess, and it doesn't have to be in dragging down the source of the Spotswood 78s, but just.
And we didn't. I don't think we stayed at anybody's home during that stretch. I remember doing much of that by myself.
Mm.
I don't know where you guys were, or how much of that was actually correct. But I remember visiting a bunch of people, Shannon Grayson and Febble Wright, and people like that, and just going there by myself
Yeah, because I remember us being together.
at the radio station and stuff.
Yeah.
Shannon Grayson, for
Yeah.
instance, or something.
Yeah.
Like that.
Well, how did that come about?
How did what come about?
Well, visiting Shannon Grayson, and how did the.
Well, we had to go find all these people.
Okay, fine.
You know, the couple of them we didn't see, but most of them we actually visited. There was people out in Ohio that we actually didn't see. But for the most part, we actually got around and found people, and therefore were able to find photographs of them, borrow photographs from their family albums and so forth.
But you should make clear, though, Bill, that, I mean, since we didn't stay in hotels or motels ever, we stayed in our van, and so we weren't terribly far away. I mean, I have memories of sleeping in our van, like at Estelin Ornaball's house, or, I mean, like, parked along the dirt road that their house was on, or visiting Steve Ledford and sleeping, like, a little bit up the dirt road where his house was, in our van and stuff like that.
Oddly enough, most people, I don't think, asked us, because
Right.
they probably just assumed we were staying at a hotel, but they didn't actually ask. These days, when I go places, people always ask where you're staying and so forth. So,
Well, I think that's a cultural difference, though, not just a matter of time, because I think that, they just, it's also a matter of privacy. I don't know whether they would have thought that since we were hippies, we were sleeping in a van or not, but it's also that, it was, that we weren't going, although we did stay at Estelin Orna's house.
Mhm.
When
Yes.
we actually did
Yeah.
the recording after we'd gotten to know them a bit.
yeah.
So there were some people like that, and in fact, it was quite comfortable. Ken has washed dishes many, many times at Ola Belle Reed's house, for example. So we would spend time, and they would, many of them would like to, as I think I mentioned before, when we saw Pappy Sherrill and Snuffy Jenkins, Pappy insisted on having the grilled ribeye steaks for us all, and, talking about a feed bag or whatever term you might have used for it. And Ola Belle, the same thing. She wanted to make us a big meal and stuff. So,
But a lot of those people on that particular trip were just, all we really needed was an hour or so to talk to them.
on the
It
early
wasn't the
bluegrass
whole,
trip, yeah.
it wasn't the whole
No.
recording session. We didn't do any recording.
You were essentially getting
We're just
liner
taking notes,
information,
yeah.
getting. Would you have to get permission from them, or was that?
We did. I don't know that we had to. Probably we didn't have to, but we did get permission.
How did you handle?
Pay them royalties.
How did you handle royalties? Did you go enter into agreements with them?
Yeah.
Written agreements?
Mhm.
Yeah.
The same as we did the other artists in the early days, a very simple contract that
Right.
specified a rate for, I think it was the first 500 records, and then it would go up after that, based on the assumption that we would be breaking even, or that we would have broken even.
Was anybody worried about that? Like you were some big record company that was going to swing?
No, every
Swindle's a
now
strong
and
word,
then,
but,
every now and then.
Just sort of fearful? I need a lawyer. Should I have
No,
judge look it over?
nobody wanted a lawyer back then. They were mostly happy to simply, and most of them, I don't think, in fact, it made all that big an impression on them that they were going to have the record out. Some it did, but most of them I think it didn't. And the other thing is that, the swindling was a part of, in the sense that there were some people who definitely had this notion that somehow or another, people would be buying their stuff in supermarkets, and somebody would be making tons of money off them. But the people who felt that way were definitely in the minority, and most of them, when they looked at us, realized, that we're not like fast-talking guys from the city chomping on big cigars and who were likely to be looking to rip them off. So usually after a couple of conversations, people would feel reassured. And there were a couple of people who never did, but for the most part, I would say that's true with Eagle.
Yeah, I think most of them, it probably, either they were so removed from the notion that they just didn't really cross their mind to think about it. Or they figured, well, if they get a little something, that's more than they're getting now, and that they're better off. People didn't seem to be suspicious about it. Even up to Wilma Lee and Stoney Cooper, who, had professional recording background, who were still involved with the Grand Ole Opry and so forth. Just more people were basically trusting back then. But it also may reflect a fact that people just assumed they were going to get cheated anyhow. I really don't know. You'd have to ask them, but I think these days people are much more careful and suspicious about stuff. And $15 I might lose $15 if I don't pin this thing down.
And actually, it tended to be the younger musicians who were more concerned, as you would, I suppose, expect. I mean, they were the ones who were much more accustomed to dealing with the real world. In the case of Wilma Lee and Stoney, they had been, they made their living comfortably from being on the Opry and hadn't recorded for a number of years. So I think that in their case, it's also that they were just familiar enough with how things work, that if all of a sudden the record was getting played all over the radio, they'd wonder if they weren't getting any money. But they would hope that it would do that. But I think it really was more people like Norman Blake and the country cooking guys and so on.
I'm thinking about the early days of bluegrass series, per se.
Yes.
Beyond that, there was a variety of reaction. Still, hardly anybody wanted a lawyer back then.
Yeah.
I can't even remember when we first talked to a lawyer. It probably wasn't until after George Thorogood, because even he didn't have a lawyer. So it's probably, I could probably figure it out, but it's probably many years into things. We didn't have a lawyer either. We had a lawyer that drafted our first contract form for us, and our payment was to give him one copy each of the first two albums.
Who was that person?
2 albums. I can't remember right now.
Okay.
One copy each of the first 2 albums?
Two only.